كلمته كانت واضحة، مثل ما أنا دعمت فايدة بدي أدعم إيران.
فتحنا أبواب اللهيب، أبواب جهنم على البلد.
Good afternoon on the Sunday 1st of September. I'm Yumna Naufal and these are today's headlines. The world awaits to see whether or not an action on Syria will take place after President Obama calls for an intervention. President Michel Sleiman calls for the resumption of national dialogue to agree on a defense strategy based on the Babda Declaration. And Pope Francis calls for the world to unite in a day of fasting and prayer for Syria. As the Arab League prepares to discuss the ongoing crisis in Syria this evening, the world awaits the U.S. Congress's decision on whether or not to take military action against the war-torn country, a decision which will not be revealed until September 9th. Linda Tamim reports.
Arab League foreign ministers are due to meet in the Egyptian capital of Cairo this evening to discuss the ongoing crisis in Syria. The meeting had been scheduled for Tuesday, but the delegation says it was advanced in light of rapid developments in the Syria situation and based on the request of several Arab states. Head of the Syrian National Council, Ahmed Al-Jarba, will give a speech at the meeting. The Arab League on Tuesday accused the Syrian government of carrying out a chemical weapons attack in a suburb of Damascus that killed hundreds of people, including children, on August 21st. Yet, some influential Arab League members, including Egypt, Iraq, Lebanon, Tunisia, and Algeria, have expressed opposition to foreign military intervention in Syria, and they were not the only ones. Groups of demonstrators gathered throughout the United States to protest President Barack Obama's proposed military strike on Syria. Rallies were held in cities coast to coast calling for the Obama administration to wait for the report of UN monitors who returned from Syria on Saturday with samples that could determine whether government forces used chemical weapons. In New York's Times Square, groups held up signs saying "Hands off Syria" and chanted that they didn't want another war.
UN inspectors are still doing their work. We have not allowed them enough time to do their job, to thoroughly report back the facts of this investigation. And before we preemptively go to war, we need to have enough information to make an informed decision.
Well, we're out here again today to try to stop a new war in the Middle East before it starts. The last thing the people of Syria need, the last thing the people of the United States need, is a new bombing missile war against their country.
We think that our country needs to get out of Iraq and Afghanistan. The drones are killing millions of innocent people from not only just in Pakistan and Afghanistan, Yemen, Northern Africa, different parts of the world. We think it's an illegal, dirty war that shouldn't be being fought. Our people right here in this country don't need another war that's going to cost them billions and trillions of dollars to kill innocent Syrian people, which will affect the entire region just like the Iraqi war did.
We wanted to go to war against Syria without approval of the United Nations. The United Nations means nothing to the United States. They are the bullies, and they have the weapons, and they are the cowboys, and they can go and just do it. And nobody can tell them no because they have the power. But this time, we're saying no.
But earlier yesterday, President Barack Obama delayed an imminent military strike against Syria to seek approval from the U.S. Congress, as polls showed strong opposition from Americans already wary of wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Approval will take at least 10 days if it comes at all. Syria's main opposition bloc expressed disappointment over Obama's decision. However, the party says it believes American lawmakers will approve a strike.
President Barack Obama announced he has decided the U.S. should take military action against Syria, but backed away from an immediate strike, saying he would first seek the approval of Congress. In a statement from the White House Rose Garden, Obama said he had authorized the use of military force to punish Syria for a chemical weapons attack on August 21st that U.S. officials say killed 1,429 people. Military assets to carry out a strike are in place and ready to move on his order. His decisions was a significant shift away from what was perceived to be a strike fairly sooner against Syrian targets. He had been prepared to act unilaterally after the British Parliament refused to go along with American plans. In his words,
after careful deliberation, I have decided that the United States should take military action against Syrian regime targets. This would not be an open-ended intervention. We would not put boots on the ground. Instead, our action would be designed to be limited in duration and scope. But I'm confident we can hold the Assad regime accountable for their use of chemical weapons, deter this kind of behavior, and degrade their capacity to carry it out. I've long believed that our power is rooted not just in our military might, but in our example as a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And that's why I've made a second decision. I will seek authorization for the use of force from the American people's representatives in Congress. Our military has positioned assets in the region. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs has informed me that we are prepared to strike whenever we choose. Moreover, the chairman has indicated to me that our capacity to execute this mission is not time sensitive. It will be effective tomorrow, or next week, or 1 month from now. And I'm prepared to give that order.
President Michel Sleiman is calling for the resumption of national dialogue to agree on a defense strategy based on the Babda Declaration and the vision he has proposed to bickering officials. A clear answer to Speaker Nabih Berri, who a day earlier made a similar but a wider initiative. We should form an all-embracing government as soon as possible and hold national dialogue to agree on a defense strategy based on the vision I have proposed and on the Babda Declaration, Sleiman said in a speech at his summer residence in Beit ad-Din on the anniversary of the creation of Greater Lebanon in 1920. Sleiman also rejected a possible U.S. military strike on Syria in response to the Assad regime's alleged use of chemical weapons and reiterated the need for a political solution in the neighboring country. Maronite Patriarch Shadadai holds officials responsible for the deadly bombings that have recently rocked Beirut's southern suburbs and the northern city of Tripoli. Political parties don't value the heavy price paid by innocent citizens in the 3 bombings, Adai said in his sermon at his summer residence in Diman. He said politicians haven't yet realized that they are responsible for the victims over their prolonged conflict and their obstruction of the work of constitutional institutions. Adai also criticized politicians for not coming up with a real initiative to resolve the cabinet formation crisis. He reiterated that the new government should be strong and capable of protecting citizens, imposing security and controlling arms proliferated across the country. Progressive Socialist Party leader Walid Jumblatt is appealing for unity, urging politicians to end their differences amid critical developments in the region. In remarks to An-Nahar Daily published today, Jumblatt said the stage that Lebanon and the region are passing through require an end to internal disputes and skirmishes. His words echoed similar remarks he made on Friday when he urged the bickering officials not to fall in the trap of the wager on radical changes in Syria. They must also end their involvement in the fighting in Syria and avoid returning to a new round of issuing accusations of treason against each other at a time when the Lebanese people have lost their faith in their country. A Future Movement official criticized Speaker Nabih Berri for allegedly ignoring the UN Security Council Resolution 1701 and confiscating the authorities of President Michel Sleiman. In remarks to An-Nahar Daily, published today, the official, who was not identified, said a speech made by Berri a day earlier had loopholes, mainly over the legitimacy of the weapons of the army and the resistance in the south. Berri launched an initiative calling for the resumption of national dialogue among bickering politicians for a period of at least 5 consecutive days to discuss the form and policy statement of the future government, revive talks on a new electoral law, and support the military to deal with arms in Tripoli and salvage the eastern Bekaa Valley and the northern border with Syria from the chaos of arms and gunmen. Coming up next, anti-apartheid leader and former South African President Nelson Mandela returns to his Johannesburg home. A special report when we come back. Welcome back. Yemeni Prime Minister Mohammed Salem Basindwa escapes an assassination attempt when unidentified gunmen opened fire on his motorcade in Sana'a. The officials said no one was injured in the attack, which happened yesterday evening while Basindwa was returning home after a cabinet meeting. The Prime Minister's security chief said that men in a car parked near Basindwa's house opened fire on the motorcade. Security guards returned fire and the attackers fled the scene. Security forces were pursuing the attackers after the shootout. This was the first such attack to target the Prime Minister, who has headed a national unity government since December of 2011. The Sindwa was a leading opposition figure under ousted President Ali Abdullah Saleh. And in news around the world in brief, at least 24 members of a vigilante group in northeastern Nigeria have been killed in an ambush during a botched attempt to arrest Boko Haram members. Security officials said fighters from the rebel group wearing army uniforms ambushed more than 100 vigilantes on Friday. Officials claim another 34 people are missing after the attack. A member of the government's mixed military and police joint task force, who declined to be named, confirmed the death toll from the incident as 24. Pope Francis calls for the world to unite in a day of fasting and prayer for Syria and says God and history will judge anyone using chemical weapons. May the cry for peace enter the hearts of everyone so that they may all lay down their weapons, the Pope told thousands of pilgrims at the Vatican. He announced that the prayers would be led by a 5-hour vigil in St. Peter's Square, telling the international community it should make every effort for peace. Radiation near a tank holding highly contaminated water at Japan's crippled Fukushima nuclear plant has risen 18-fold, according to the plant's operator, highlighting the struggle to bring the crisis under control after more than 2 years. Radiation of 1,800 millisieverts per hour, enough to kill an exposed person in 4 hours, was detected near the bottom of one storage tank on Saturday, according to Tokyo Electric Power Co., also known as TEPCO. Readings taken on August 22nd measured radiation of 100 millisieverts per hour at the same tank. And North Korea says it rescinded its invitation for a U.S. envoy to visit the country to seek the freedom of an American detainee because Washington perpetrated a grave provocation by allegedly mobilizing nuclear-capable bombers during recent military drills with Seoul. The move signals the possible informal negotiations between the two countries over detainee Kenneth Bae were not going smoothly, with Pyongyang seeking some concessions from Washington in return for releasing the man. Anti-apartheid leader and former South African President Nelson Mandela has been discharged from hospital and has returned home after being treated for a recurring lung infection. 95-year-old Mandela has been receiving medical treatment in a Pretoria hospital for almost 3 months since June 8th. More in the following report.
An ambulance convoy was seen arriving at Mandela's home in Houghton, Johannesburg this morning, shortly after the news broke of his hospital discharge. Government sources say anti-apartheid leader and former South African President Nelson Mandela has returned home, where he will continue to receive intensive treatment and care after spending 3 months in hospital with a lung infection. Mandela celebrated his 95th birthday in hospital on July 18th, showered with tributes from around the world. Thousands of well-wishers had visited the Pretoria medical facility during his stay there to leave flowers, cards and gifts. Many were already anticipating news of his release.
It makes us feel great. It's good news that he has recovered. It's everyone's prayers in South Africa that he has to recover. And after such a long time that he has been in hospital, it's great news and a relief that he's going home.
The doctors have seen that they have done enough on him, on his condition. They've been stabilizing him for quite some time now. And maybe they've seen that there won't be any improvement or such on him. Maybe on their medical perspective. So they've discussed with the family maybe that they need to release Mandela to go home.
South Africa's presidency says Mandela's condition remains critical and is at times unstable. Nevertheless, his team of doctors are convinced that he will receive the same level of intensive care at his Houghton home that he received in Pretoria. His latest hospitalization in June had attracted a wave of attention and sympathy at home and across the world for the revered statesman who is admired as a symbol of struggle against injustice and of racial reconciliation.
This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now let me remind you of our headlines. Just in, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry says his country has proof sarin gas was used in the Damascus attack and is urging Congress to vote for military action against the Syrian regime. President Michel Sleiman calls for the resumption of national dialogue to agree on a defense strategy based on the Babda Declaration. Pope Francis calls for the world to unite in a day of fasting and prayer for Syria. This marks the end of this week's headlines. Make sure to catch us tomorrow at the same time for what's making headlines in Lebanon and around the world. Until then, be safe.
كل التجرباتها مثل ما أنا دعمت فايدة بدي أدعم الثاني.
فتحنا أبواب اللهيب، أبواب جهنم على البلد.